For 2 years, I was the family ATM. I paid their mortgage, my sister's student loans, her car payments, all while they called me the less ambitious daughter. They thought the money would never stop. They were about to learn how wrong they were. If you believe family should be built on respect, not receipts, stick around to see how this balance sheet gets settled. The scent of the restaurant was the first thing that hit me, a heavy, expensive mixture of seared steak, garlic butter, and the faint, woody aroma of aged wine. It was the kind of smell that clung to your clothes and announced to the world you'd had a significant meal. I navigated through the maze of tables, the hushed murmur of other diners and the soft clinking of silverware creating a bubble of calm I felt utterly disconnected from. My work blazer felt stiff and utilitarian compared to the soft cashmere and silk around me. I was a spreadsheet in a sea of oil paintings. When I finally reached their table, a large circular booth in a prime spot by the window, my mother, Carol, was in the middle of a story. She paused just long enough to offer a tight-lipped smile that was more of a social requirement than a genuine welcome. "There you are," she said, her tone implying I'd kept them waiting for an eternity. "Sorry," I murmured, sliding into the plush leather seat. The day's exhaustion settled into my bones. Closing the books for the quarter is always a nightmare. We were at it for 10 hours straight. My father, Richard, who was swirling a glass of deep red Merlot, just waved a dismissive hand. "We went ahead and ordered for you. The filet? You like the filet?" It wasn't a question. In my family, my preferences were often treated as established facts that required no further consultation. Across from me, my younger sister, Olivia, was the star of tonight's galaxy. She practically vibrated with excitement, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the candle centerpiece. This whole evening was in her honor, a celebration of her promotion to junior vice president. It was an impressive achievement, and a part of me, the sister part, was genuinely happy for her. But the other part, the part that had lived in her shadow for nearly 3 decades, felt a familiar, weary dread. In our family, Olivia's victories were never just her own. They were held up as monuments, and I was always relegated to reading the plaque. The waiter refilled my water glass, his movements silent and efficient. After he left, a brief lull fell over the table. My mother took that opportunity to lean forward, her eyes magnified slightly by her glasses. Finding mine, she patted Olivia's perfectly manicured hand. Then her gaze flickered back to me, cool and appraising. "You know, Samantha," she began, her voice carrying the placid tone of someone stating an obvious truth. "You'll just never be your sister." The words landed in the center of the table with a deafening thud. There was no malice in her delivery, which somehow made it worse. It was a simple, unchangeable law of our family's physics, like gravity or the rising of the sun. My fork, loaded with a piece of asparagus, froze halfway to my mouth. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to warp and fade into a low hum. My dad, ever the chorus to my mother's lead vocal, nodded sagely. He raised his wine glass in Olivia's direction. "To think, a vice president before she hits 30. That's real ambition. That's not just climbing the corporate ladder, that's building a new one. She's making a real mark on the world." My eyes fell to my own hands, resting on the crisp white tablecloth. They were capable hands, hands that could untangle the most complicated financial data. But they were plain, unadorned. I thought about my own job, my own stability, It was my greatest strength and, in their eyes, my most damning weakness. Oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the sudden chill, Carol touched the string of pearls nestled at the base of her throat. They glowed softly in the candlelight. "See," she said, addressing the table at large but looking at Olivia. "This is what I mean. These pearls. They're classic. Perfect for celebrating Olivia's special occasions." A hot, acidic anger surged in my chest. I had bought her those pearls. I had spent 6 months setting aside money from every paycheck, tracking down the exact luster and size she'd once idly mentioned wanting. When I gave them to her for her 50th birthday, she had held them up to the light and commented that they were a bit plain, but sweet. Now, they were being repurposed. Their origin story erased. Recast as a prop in the ongoing celebration of my sister. The present melted away. And for a second, I was back in the suffocating humidity of a June afternoon 6 years ago. It was Olivia's graduation day. She stood on the front lawn, shimmering in a white dress, while my father dangled the keys to a brand new, cherry red Mazda. I remembered the overwhelming smell of the leather interior, the giant, ridiculous bow on the hood. A year earlier, at my own graduation, where I'd received my accounting degree with honors, I was handed a hefty ceramic mug with "World's Has-Own Accountant" printed on the side. When they saw my forced smile, my dad had put a heavy arm around my shoulders. "You don't need the help, Sam," he'd explained patiently, as if to a child. "You're the stable one. You've already got it all figured out." Their logic was a fortress, impenetrable to reason. My responsibility was a given, so it required no reward. Olivia's free spirit was a virtue, so it required constant funding. The waiter returned with our food. The interruption, a welcome reprieve. But as soon as he left, the conversation picked right back up. A relentless torrent of praise for Olivia, her genius influencer campaign, her effortless networking, the fabulous downtown apartment she could now easily afford. I tried to find an entry point, a way to connect. "Things are going really well at my firm, too," I offered. "I was just made lead on the quarterly audit for our biggest client. It's a huge responsibility." My mother smiled vaguely. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Audits sound complicated." "Olivia, honey, you have to tell your father about that CEO you met at the conference in Chicago." And just like that, I was erased. My contribution dismissed. My world deemed too dull to merit exploration. I spent the rest of the meal pushing food around my plate, a silent spectator at my own family dinner. When the check arrived, it was placed ceremoniously in the center of the table. $427. I glanced at it, and a bitter thought surfaced. I could pay for this whole charade. I could cover the cost of my own humiliation without breaking a sweat. And that was the cruelest joke of all. The memory of my father's phone call from 2 years ago surfaced, sharp and clear. I could almost hear the feigned panic in his voice. The carefully rehearsed story of a temporary tight spot. "Just for a month or two, Sam," he had pleaded. "Just until we get back on our feet." A month or two had become a permanent line item in my budget. It had become the vacation I never took, the new car I kept putting off, the extra payments I could have made on my own student loans. It had become this dinner. I couldn't swallow another bite of food. I couldn't listen to another sycophantic story. A calm, cold decision formed in my mind. It wasn't explosive or angry, but quiet and absolute. I reached into my purse, past my wallet, and into a small side pocket where I kept important receipts. My fingers found the folded piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was a copy of their latest mortgage statement, marked paid in full with a date from last week. I smoothed it out on the tablecloth, the black ink a stark contrast to the white linen. "I've been paying this for 2 years," I said. My voice didn't waver. It was as flat and factual as the numbers on the page. Olivia's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. She looked from the paper to me, then to our parents. My father's face began to model, a tide of red creeping up his neck. My mother, however, was a master of deflection. She simply laughed. A light, tinkling sound that was completely at odds with the tension in the air. "Well, of course, dear. That's what family does for each other," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "We support each other. Olivia needs to be able to pour all her energy into her career without being distracted by worries about us. So I'm the one who carries the worry," I pressed, the question hanging in the air. That's when my father's composure broke. He slammed his palm flat on the table, the force rattling the silverware and making the water glasses jump. "Samantha, for God's sake, how could you be so selfish?" he boomed, his voice attracting glances from neighboring tables. "You're trying to ruin your sister's special night with all this accounting nonsense. We needed help. You were in a position to help. End of story." His words were meant to shame me into silence. But instead of shame, I felt a profound and sudden detachment. The anger I had been suppressing didn't boil over. It simply evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow clarity. In that moment, I saw them not as my parents, but as a hostile board of directors evaluating an asset. I was a resource, a utility, a line of credit. My value wasn't in who I was, but in what I could provide. My hand, when I reached for my water glass, was trembling almost imperceptibly. The world seemed to sharpen around me, the glint of light on a knife, the deep red of my father's wine, the shocked look on Olivia's face, but I felt like I was watching it all from behind a thick pane of glass. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I calmly stood up, picked up my blazer from the back of the chair, and collected my purse. I walked away from the table, away from the half-eaten filet mignon they had ordered for me, and out into the cool night air, leaving them to figure out the bill. The following week was defined by a loud, ringing silence. My phone, usually buzzing with family group texts or calls from my mom, remained inert. It was a deliberate, punishing quiet, designed to make me feel the weight of my transgression. At first, I felt a phantom anxiety, constantly checking for a message that never came. But by Thursday, the anxiety had faded, replaced by a strange sense of peace. The silence wasn't a punishment, it was a reprieve. Then, on the following Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable onslaught of guilt and recrimination. I was ready for the anger, the tears, the accusations. But the voice that greeted me was none of those things. It was bubbly, sweet, and utterly disconnected from the scene at the restaurant. "Sam, honey, how are you?" she chirped, her tone as bright and artificial as a plastic flower. I was momentarily thrown off. "I'm fine. Mom, how are you?" "Oh, wonderful, dear. Just wonderful," she said breezily. "Listen, I know you're terribly busy with your important numbers and things, but I was wondering if you could do your old mom a huge favor. I'm trying to get all our paperwork together for taxes. And honestly, it's just a hopeless jumble. It gives me a headache just looking at it. You're so brilliant with that sort of thing. Could you possibly come over this weekend and help me sort it all out? I just don't know where to even begin. My mother's voice, syrupy, sweet, and utterly oblivious, echoed in my ear. For a moment, I was paralyzed by the sheer audacity of it. The scene at the restaurant, the public humiliation, my father's roar of indignation, my silent, final exit. It was as if it had all been a dream. In her world, the slate had been wiped clean, not by apology, but by simple, convenient amnesia. All that remained was her daughter, the brilliant one with numbers, and a messy pile of tax forms. A part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 29 years to please them, wanted to just say yes, to fall back into the familiar, painful rhythm of being useful. But the new, colder part of me, the part that had been born in that restaurant, was screaming. It screamed that this was a test, a trap, a reassertion of control. And yet, a third voice, Anna I didn't recognize, whispered a different idea. It was a morbid curiosity. What would I find in that hopeless jumble of papers? After 2 years of blind payments, what did their financial landscape actually look like? Okay, Mom, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant. I can come on Saturday morning. Oh, you're a lifesaver. Honey, a true lifesaver, she gushed. I'll bake your favorite scones. I hung up the phone and stared at the blank screen, a bitter taste in my mouth. She wouldn't bake scones. She'd buy them from the bakery near their house, the one Olivia loved. The drive to my childhood home that Saturday was a journey through a landscape of ghosts. Every street corner, every familiar storefront, held a memory of a time when I believed their love was unconditional. The house itself looked the same, a handsome 2-story colonial with pristine white siding and dark green shutters. It was the picture of suburban success, a picture I now knew I was paying the monthly installments on. I let myself in with the key they insisted I keep. The house was quiet. A note on the kitchen counter, written in my mother's looping cursive, said she and Dad had gone to the garden center and that the files were in the home office. The office was my father's sanctuary, but it had always felt more like a shrine to Olivia. Her framed graduation photo sat center stage on the desk. Her various debate trophies and academic awards lined the bookshelves. My own contributions were there. If you looked hard enough, a small, framed photo from my college graduation, tucked behind a large, gleaming trophy of Olivia's. We were both smiling, but her smile was triumphant. Mine looked like it was holding its breath. I sat down in my father's large leather chair, which squeaked in protest. On the desk was a large cardboard box overflowing with folders, receipts, and loose papers. It was exactly the kind of chaos my mother cultivated to prove she was a big-picture person who couldn't be bothered with details. For an hour, I worked methodically. The familiar task of sorting and organizing a temporary bomb. I separated W-2s from 1099s, mortgage interest statements from property tax receipts. It was all standard, predictable. And then I saw it, tucked at the bottom of the box, not in a folder but just lying loose, was a different kind of envelope. It was from a federal student loan servicer, and the name on the statement was Olivia C. Henderson, my sister. My hand trembled slightly as I slid the single sheet of paper out. It was a statement from 3 months prior. The remaining balance was $19,412. And at the bottom, in the section detailing the most recent payment, was a note about the auto-debit account. I recognized the last 4 digits. It was my savings account. My breath caught in my throat. Stapled to the top corner of the statement was a small, yellow sticky note. The kind my mother used for everything. In her handwriting, it said, "Sam will pay gradually. No need to worry, oh. No need to worry, Olivia." The words felt like a physical slap. The room suddenly felt cold. The air thin. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time emergency. This was a plan. A deliberate, calculated decision to offload my sister's debt onto me without my knowledge or consent. Affrontique? Desperate energy took over. I was no longer an accountant sorting taxes. I was an investigator at a crime scene. I started digging through the box with a new purpose. My heart hammering against my ribs, I found a folder labeled car. Inside was the payment book for Olivia's Mazda. Sure enough, the last 18 months of payments had been made via transfers from the same account. My account. Then I found the credit card statements. A Visa. Also in Olivia's name. I spread them out across the desk. My hands shaking so badly the papers rattled. The charges told a story of a life I was funding but had no part in. Dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford. Weekend trips to wineries. A $200 sweater from a boutique downtown. A $500 charge for a spa day. Each purchase was a small, sharp betrayal. I was so absorbed in the sickening paper trail that I didn't hear my mother come in. "Find everything you need. Honey." I looked up. My eyes blurry. She was standing in the doorway, holding a mug of tea. A serene smile on her face. I held up one of the credit card statements. My voice was a raw whisper. "What is this?" She didn't even flinch. She walked over, placed the mug on the corner of the desk, and glanced at the paper in my hand. "Oh, that. Honestly, Sam, it's for the best. Your sister needs to build a good credit score. And she has to look the part for her job. You know, that whole world is about image." I stared at her, speechless. The justification was so casual, so breathtakingly entitled. It defied logic. "I'm paying for her clothes, for her spa days." "Don't be so dramatic," she sighed, picking up a stray receipt. "It's just helping out. Family is supposed to help each other. We are a family. Aren't we?" Just then, my father appeared in the doorway, drawn by our voices. He saw the papers spread across his desk, saw the look on my face, and his expression immediately hardened. "What's going on in here?" "Samantha is getting herself worked up over nothing," my mother said, waving a dismissive hand. "Just a few bills." A few bills. I finally found my voice, and it was shaking with a rage so profound it felt like it was tearing me apart. "You're using my money to pay for her entire life, her loan, her car, her credit card. Did you think I would never find out?" "It was necessary," my father boomed. Stepping into the room, he crossed his arms. A classic posture of unassailable authority. "That car is essential for her to impress clients. Her success reflects on this entire family. Your success, well, it's Keter. Isn't it? It's spreadsheets and numbers. It pays the bills. That's your strength." The cruelty of it, the way he framed my contribution as a mere utility, stole the air from my lungs. I felt a desperate need for my sister to know, for her to be the one to put a stop to this. I pulled out my phone, me fingers fumbling, and dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Hey. Sam, what's up? Olivia. I started, my voice cracking. Did you know they were using my money to pay for your loans and your car? There was a pause. Then she gave a little laugh. A sound that was completely devoid of concern. Oh. That mom mentioned something about it. She said you had all this extra money from your job and you were happy to help out while I got my career off the ground. Is there a problem? Happy to help. The words echoed in the office. A final. Domning verdict. I was a willing participant in my own fleecing. I still have my own student loans. Olivia. I said, the words feeling pathetic and small. Before she could answer, my mother took the phone from my hand. Don't bother your sister with this. Samantha. She has enough on her plate, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Besides, with her wedding coming up now, we're all going to have to pitch in more than ever. It's going to be a very expensive affair. And we need it to be perfect. She ended the call and handed the phone back to me. I felt like I was drowning. It wasn't just a few bills. It wasn't just temporary help. It was a long-term, systemic subsidy. And now, it came with future obligations. My life. My income. My future, it had all been annexed to fund the perfect life for their perfect daughter. I left their house in a daze, not even bothering to put the papers back in the box. The drive home was a blur. When I got back to my own apartment, my sanctuary, the one place that was truly mine, I walked straight to my computer. The anger was still there. But it was starting to cool. To sharpen into something else. Something methodical. I opened a new spreadsheet. I created columns: date, item, amount, category. My fingers flew across the keyboard. My accounting skills, the very thing my father had dismissed, now becoming my weapon. I entered every transaction I could remember. Every bill I had just uncovered. The mortgage payments, 24 of them. The student loan payments, the car. I went through my own online banking history, finding the monthly transfers I'd been making. The ones labeled simply, family support. Then I added the estimated credit card charges. The rows filled up. A meticulous chronicle of my own exploitation. Mortgage $28,800. Olivia, student loan $19,400. Olivia, car $3,600. Olivia, credit card est. $9,200. I created a final cell at the bottom and entered the formula. The number that appeared felt like a punch to the gut. $61,000. I stared at the screen. The number glowing in the dim light of my apartment. It was more than I had left on my own student loans. It was a down payment on a house. It was a future they had stolen from me. One $500 payment at a time. I needed someone else to see this. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I picked up the phone and called my colleague Chloe. My one true friend in the city. Chloe. I said. My voice hoarse. Can I send you something? I need another set of eyes on this. I emailed her the spreadsheet. A minute later, she called back. Her voice was quiet, but furious. Sam, what the hell is this? Please tell me this is a projection for a client. It's the last 2 years of my life, I said. And then the whole story came tumbling out. When I was done, there was a long silence on the other end. Then Chloe said, her voice firm and clear. Sam, listen to me. This isn't helping out. This isn't what family does. This is financial exploitation. Full stop. They are stealing from you. Her words, so blunt and unambiguous, were like a bucket of cold water. She was right. It wasn't a gray area. It was theft. A few days later, my resolve was cemented by an unlikely source: Facebook. Chloe sent me a screenshot with no comment. Just a single angry face emoji. It was a public post from my mother's account. There was a picture of Olivia, her hand held up to the camera, a ridiculously large diamond sparkling on her finger. The caption was effusive. Some thrilling news to share with our wonderful friends and family. Our beautiful daughter Olivia is engaged to the love of her life. We are over the moon. Get ready for the wedding of the century. She had tagged my father, Olivia, her new fiancé, and about 50 of their closest friends and relatives. Everyone, I noticed, except me. And then, the final sentence, a dagger twisted in a fresh wound, and we know her amazing, supportive sister Samantha will be right there with us to help make this the most perfect day imaginable. Below that post was another, an album from the week before. The title was Vegas Fun. There they were, my mom, my dad, and Olivia, grinning arm in arm in front of a slot machine, raising elaborate cocktails in another photo, posing in front of the Bellagio fountains. They were living a life of leisure and luxury while I was working overtime. A fact I knew because I'd had to stay late 3 nights that week to close out a project. They had been vacationing on my dime while telling me they were in a tight spot. The last of the hurt. The last of the grief for the family I wished I had. Finally burned away. It left behind an anger that was as cold and hard as steel. There were no more tears to cry. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen, then at the picture of their smiling faces. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken my kindness, my sense of duty, my love. And they had monetized it. I wasn't their daughter. I was their sponsor. And the sponsorship was about to be canceled. My phone buzzed, startling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, expecting another friend reacting to the engagement news. But it wasn't. It was a number I recognized, but hadn't seen in a long time. My uncle. My dad's younger brother. David. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Hello? Sam, it's Uncle David. His voice was warm, but laced with something I couldn't quite identify. Concern. Hey. Quito. I just got off the phone with your dad. He was going on about Olivia's engagement and the wedding plans. And he said a few things that, well, they didn't sit right with me. I just wanted to call and make sure you were okay. My uncle's voice on the other end of the line was a life raft in a churning sea of betrayal. For a week, I'd been suffocating in the vacuum of my family's deceit. My anger, a cold, hard stone in my chest. To hear a voice from within that world, a voice laced not with expectation or accusation, but with genuine concern, was so unexpected it almost broke me. Uncle David, I whispered, my throat tight. Yeah. Kid, though. It's me, he said, his tone gentle. I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, but I just had your dad on the phone for half an hour, crowing about Olivia's engagement. And, well, the way he was talking about the wedding, the costs, and your contributions. It just didn't sound right. He made you sound less like a sister and more like the event sponsor. The accuracy of his words, the simple, unvarnished truth of them, was the final pin that burst the dam. A sob escaped my lips, a ragged, ugly sound that I couldn't hold back. The cold, calculated fury I had been nursing for days dissolved, revealing the raw, agonizing hurt beneath. "Oh, Sam," he said softly, his voice full of a sorrow that told me he wasn't surprised. "It's worse than that, isn't it?" I sank onto my couch, the phone pressed hard against my ear, and I told him everything. The words poured out of me in a torrent: the 2 years of mortgage payments, the secret funding of Olivia's life, the credit cards, the student loan, the Vegas trip, the public announcement that the family pariah, who would be helping to plan the wedding. When I finally got to the $61,000 total, I was crying so hard I could barely speak. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. A quiet, steady presence on the other end of the line. When I was finished, my breath catching in shuddering gasps, he let out a long, heavy sigh. "I'm so sorry, Sam," he said, and the simple sincerity in his voice was more comforting than any platitude. I wish I could say I was shocked. "Your father, my brother, he's always had a blind spot when it comes to Olivia. And your mother enables it. They see her as a reflection of themselves, their masterpiece. And they see you as, well, as capable. And they have taken advantage of your capability your entire life." He paused, and I could hear him thinking, "I remember when you two were kids," he continued, his voice distant with memory. "There was this one Christmas. You must have been 10, and Olivia was 8. You both wanted the same expensive doll. Your parents told you they could only afford one. You, being you, immediately said Olivia should have it. You said it would make her happier, and you spent the rest of the day making sure she had the best Christmas ever. Your dad pulled me aside later and said, 'See, Samantha is so mature. She understands.' He didn't see that you were a child who had just sacrificed her own joy. He only saw that you had made things easier for him." His story, that half-forgotten memory, slotted into place with everything else. It wasn't a new behavior. It was a lifelong pattern. I wasn't the family accountant. I was the family shock absorber. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice small. "You do what you should have been allowed to do 20 years ago," he said firmly. "You take care of yourself. You set your boundaries. And you make them out of concrete. They won't like it. But your life is your own, Sam, not theirs to spend." His words echoed in my mind for the next 2 days. They were a permission slip I never knew I needed. The conversation with him had transformed my anger. It was no longer just a reaction to a personal betrayal. It was a righteous, justified fury against a lifetime of inequity. The inevitable call came on Thursday afternoon. It was my mother. And the saccharine sweetness was gone from her voice, replaced by an efficient, businesslike tone. "Samantha," she began, without any preamble, "I found the most perfect venue for Olivia's wedding. It's the old lakeside manor. But they are booking up for next year already. And they require a $5,000 non-refundable deposit to hold the date. I need you to transfer the money by tomorrow." It wasn't a request. It was an invoice. The sheer, unmitigated entitlement of it was so astounding. I almost laughed. She had completely bypassed the part where she was supposed to address the $61,000 of my money she had already spent. We were just moving on to the next withdrawal. But this time, I was ready. I stood up from my desk at work and walked over to the window. Looking down at the traffic below, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "No," I said. The silence on the other end of the line was so absolute I thought for a second the call had dropped. what she finally sputtered. "What did you just say?" I said no. I repeated, my voice quiet, but as solid as granite. "I will not be paying the deposit. I will not be paying for any part of this wedding. I'm done." "Done? What do you mean?" "Done." Her voice was rising, a sharp, frantic edge creeping in. "Don't be ridiculous. Samantha, this is your sister's wedding. It's the most important day of her life." "My answer is no," I said. "I will not be contributing another cent." Her confusion curdled into rage. "After everything we have done for you, the sacrifices we made to give you a good life, this is how you repay us. By being selfish and petty over a little bit of money, you're going to tear this family apart. Do you know that? What will people think?" "I have to go." "Mom," I said, my voice still level. "I have a meeting." I ended the call before she could unleash the full tirade. My heart was pounding, a wild drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. For the first time, I had held the line. That night, I called Chloe. "Phase 2 is a go," I said. We spent the next 2 weeks in a whirlwind of activity. Chloe, a marketing whiz herself, helped me completely overhaul my resume, reframing my quiet competence into a narrative of strategic financial leadership. We stayed up late, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of righteous purpose. Scouring job listings in cities 1,000 miles away, I focused my search on the West Coast, on places where the air was different, where the ghosts of my family couldn't reach me. Seattle became the goal. One night, as we were drafting another cover letter, Chloe pulled up the spreadsheet on her laptop. The $61,000 figure glared at us from the screen. "You know," she said, her expression serious. "I ran some numbers. With your current salary, minus the family tax, you could pay off your own student loans in about 6 years. If you get even a modest raise with a new job," she typed a few things into a calculator, "you could be completely debt-free in 3 years. Sam, think about that. 3 years. Instead of 15. It wasn't just about money. It was about time. It was about reclaiming more than a decade of my life that would have been spent shackled to a debt. All while my family celebrated the life they had built on my back. The vision was so powerful, so liberating. It solidified every last shred of doubt into pure, unadulterated resolve. A week later, I was doing a final round video interview with a major tech firm in Seattle. I felt a confidence I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just a stable accountant. I was a skilled professional. And I knew my worth. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was "Offer of Employment." They were offering me a senior analyst position with a salary 30% higher than what I was making now. I read the email 3 times, then let out a breath. I felt like I'd been holding my entire life. I typed out my acceptance before I could second-guess it. It was done. I had a way out. That weekend, I began the process of untangling my life, starting with my finances. That's when I found the final, most sickening piece of the puzzle. I was at my bank, closing an old joint savings account I still shared with my parents. One we'd set up ages ago for emergencies. As the teller was processing the paperwork, she asked, "And would you like to do anything with the other linked investment account today?" "Ms. Henderson." I frowned. "I'm sorry. What other account?" She turned her monitor towards me. And there it was. A money market account. In the names of Richard and Carol Henderson. It had a balance of just over $16,000. The transaction history showed small, steady deposits over the last 3 years, but almost no withdrawals. They hadn't been in a tight spot. They hadn't been struggling. They had been hoarding money, building their own private nest egg. While they bled me dry, any lingering trace of guilt I might have felt, any whisper of a doubt that I was being too harsh, vanished in a flash of white-hot rage. That night, I went to an office supply store. I bought a heavy-duty, 3-inch, 3-ring binder. Black. I bought plastic page protectors, divider tabs, and a new cartridge of ink for my printer. Back in my apartment, I set to work. This was my world, the world of evidence and order. I printed everything: the mortgage statements, the student loan documents, the car payment history, the credit card bills, which I had obtained online using login information I found in my dad's mess of an office. I highlighted every payment that came from my account. I printed the screenshots of the Vegas trip, of the Facebook post announcing the engagement. I created a summary page, my original spreadsheet, showing the grand total of their theft. I slipped each page into a protector, snapping it into the binder with a satisfying click. It was an arsenal of truth, a heavy, undeniable record of their lies. When I was finished, I held it in my hands. It was the story of the last 2 years of my life, and it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The summons came, as I knew it would. The following Tuesday, it was my father. His voice was not the angry, blustering tone from the restaurant. It was a low, cold, intimidating growl, the voice he used when he was about to lay down the law. "Samantha, your mother is very upset," he said. "We have been more than patient. We are having an emergency family meeting tomorrow night. At the house. 7 o'clock. You will be there." It was an order, not an invitation. "I'll be there," I said, my own voice just as cold. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I spent the evening sitting on my couch, the black binder on the coffee table in front of me. I rehearsed it all in my head. I anticipated their attacks, their justifications, their attempts to twist my words. But this time, I wouldn't be fighting with emotion. I would be fighting with facts. My heart was pounding, a nervous, frantic rhythm. But my hands, when I rested them on the cool plastic cover of the binder, were perfectly steady. I was terrified, and I had never felt more ready. The next evening, I pulled up to their house at exactly 7 o'clock. The windows were all lit, casting a warm, inviting glow onto the perfectly manicured lawn. A complete illusion. I took a deep breath, grabbed the heavy binder from the passenger seat, and walked up the familiar stone path. The door opened before I could even ring the bell. My father stood there, his face a grim mask. He stepped aside to let me in without a word. I walked into the living room. It was an ambush. My mother was on the sofa, a box of tissues strategically placed beside her. Olivia was in the armchair opposite, her expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. They were arranged like a tribunal, ready to pass judgment. I didn't wait for them to begin. I walked to the coffee table in the center of their little circle, and with a quiet deliberation, I placed the heavy black binder down. It landed with a solid, definitive thud that echoed in the silent room. The thud of the binder landing on the coffee table seemed to suck all the air out of the room. It sat there between us, a black tombstone marking the death of their narrative. For a long moment, nobody spoke. My mother stared at it, her hand frozen halfway to her box of tissues. My father's eyes narrowed, his intimidation tactics failing in the face of this strange, organized defiance. Olivia just looked confused, her gaze darting between me and the ominous black book. My father found his voice first. What is this? Samantha, more of your dramatics. We are here to talk about your attitude. You're right, I said, my voice calm and even. I sat down on the single armchair, placing myself opposite the three of them. I was no longer a part of their circle. I was an auditor. Let's talk. This, I said, tapping the cover of the binder, is the agenda. I leaned forward and opened it. The pages were neatly organized with colored tabs, a system of evidence they couldn't possibly comprehend. You called this meeting because the mortgage payment is late. I began, my voice devoid of emotion. So let's start there. I flipped to the first tab, labeled Mortgage. Here are the statements for the last 24 months. As you can see, every single payment was an electronic transfer from my savings account. That comes to a total of $28,800. We were in a difficult position, my father bellowed. You were happy to help. Was I asked, looking him directly in the eye. I turned a page. Because I seem to remember you telling me it would be for a month or two. That was 2 years ago. I then flipped to the next tab. This one labeled Olivia, student loan. This is where it gets more confusing. I said, my gaze shifting to my sister. Because I don't remember ever agreeing to pay for your federal student loans. Olivia. And yet, for the past 18 months, $150 has been automatically debited from my account to pay them down, with handwritten notes from Mom confirming I would cover it. That's another $2,700. Olivia's face went pale. She turned to our mother. Mom, what is she talking about? She's twisting things. Darling, my mother said, finally grabbing a tissue and dabbing at her dry eyes. Samantha, this is cruel. You're upsetting your sister. I continued. Relentless. I flipped to the next tab. Olivia car. And the Mazda. A $500 a month payment. It seems I've been covering that for the last year as well. That's another $6,000. My father stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. That is enough. You are a selfish, ungrateful child. Throwing your money in our faces. It's not my money anymore. Is it? I replied, my voice like ice. You already spent it. I flipped to the final, thickest section. Olivia, credit card. This was my favorite part to put together. Here are the statements for a Visa card I didn't even know you had. Olivia, paid for. Once again, from my account. Let's see. Dinners at Bellamy's. $200. A sweater from Nordstrom. $300. A weekend trip to a winery with your friends. $900. Spa days. New shoes. Brunches. I let the words hang in the air. Olivia looked like she was going to be sick. She slowly turned her head to face our parents, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. You told me, she whispered, her voice trembling. You told me she had extra money. You told me she wanted to help me get set up. We were helping you, my mother insisted, her voice cracking. Your sister has plenty. Do I? I closed the binder. I still have $34,000 of my own student loan debt. I work a 50-hour week. I haven't taken a real vacation in 3 years. So you tell me. Mom, Do I have plenty? I leaned forward and placed my hands on the binder. Mortgage. Loan. Car. And credit cards. The grand total of my family support for the past 2 years comes to $61,000. The number, spoken aloud, landed with the force of a physical blow. Olivia gasped and put her hand over her mouth. My mother began to sob. Real tears this time. My father was rendered speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Just then, the doorbell rang. My father, grateful for the diversion, stomped over and flung the door open. My Uncle David stood on the porch, his expression calm and serious. David, what are you doing here? My father stammered. You told me you were having a family meeting. Richard, my uncle said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. His eyes met mine for a brief moment. A silent message of support passing between us. I thought it was important that I be here. He looked at the scene me with the binder. My parents in disarray. Olivia in tears. It seems I was right. His presence broke the spell. My father's blustering anger deflated, replaced by a sullen, shame-faced silence. My mother's sobs became keener. Uncle David's quiet authority as an outside witness, a member of their own generation, was a weapon against which they had no defense. He hadn't come to fight. He had come to watch. And his judgment was clear. The meeting was over. I stood up, left the binder on the table, a permanent record of their crimes, and walked out of the house. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voice was thin, stripped of all its usual confidence. There was no apology. There was only a bargain. Samantha, she said, your father and we've been talking. We recognize that we may have relied on you too heavily. If you would agree to just continue paying the mortgage, we would be willing to publicly acknowledge your contributions to the family. At Olivia's wedding, we could even give a toast in your honor. I was so stunned by the delusional, transactional nature of the offer that I almost laughed. They were trying to pay for their house with a public compliment. They still didn't get it. They never would. No, Mom, I said, and the finality in my own voice felt wonderful. That account is closed. And since we're sharing news, I thought you should know I've accepted a new position. In Seattle, I'm moving at the end of next month. I hung up to the sound of her stunned silence. The engagement party was a month later, 2 weeks before I was scheduled to leave. I wasn't going to go. But Uncle David convinced me. You need to close this chapter on your own terms, he'd said. Not by running away, but by walking away. I arrived late. The lakeside manor was beautiful, filled with flowers and laughter and the soft melody of a string quartet. It was all a perfect, glitteringly. I saw my parents holding court near the fireplace, their smiles looking brittle and fake. I moved through the room, accepting congratulations for my new job from relatives who had clearly been given a heavily edited version of recent events. Finally, it was time for the gifts. I watched as Olivia and her fiancé opened crystal vases and expensive kitchen appliances. Then, a waiter brought forward a single, beautifully wrapped box. It was from me. Oh, Sam, Olivia said, her voice hesitant as she took it. She looked at me, her eyes full of a complicated mixture of hope and fear. She carefully undid the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a perfect, hardbound copy of the black binder. I had had it professionally printed and bound. On the cover, in simple gold leaf, were the words, "A sister's investment." She stared at it, her hands trembling. I stepped forward, my voice not loud, but clear enough for the tables nearby to hear. "I wanted to give you something real. Olivia," I said, "something to start your new life with. That is a complete record of the $61,000 investment I made in your future over the past 2 years. I consider the debt paid in full. It's my wedding gift to you. I wish you all the best." A wave of shocked silence rippled through the room. Olivia started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as she clutched the book to her chest. My mother let out a small and fady in heavening the revenant Tepling. Strangled gasp. My father looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Whispers erupted all around us. I saw my Uncle David quietly explaining the situation to a curious aunt, his expression grim. The perfect party had imploded. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I turned and walked out of the grand ballroom, past the string quartet, and out onto the terrace. The cool night air felt clean against my skin. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt light. The weight of their expectations, their disappointments, their endless, draining need, it was gone. I was free. 3 months later, I was watching the sunset from the window of my new apartment in Seattle. The city skyline was a jagged, beautiful silhouette against a sky painted in shades of orange and purple. My new life was quiet, and it was entirely my own. I had received a text from Uncle David a month prior telling me my parents had put their house on the market. They couldn't afford it without my help. I felt a brief pang, not of guilt, but of a distant, melancholy sadness for what could have been. My laptop chimed. It was an email from Olivia. It was long and rambling, but the sentiment was clear. She apologized, profusely and sincerely. She said opening that book was the most painful and necessary moment of her life. She had gotten a second job and was creating her own spreadsheet, now a repayment plan for me. However long it took, she said she was starting to see our parents for who they were, and that she was finally, truly growing up. She ended by asking if she could come visit me in Seattle. When I was ready, I looked out at the lights beginning to twinkle across the city. I thought about her offer. Forgiveness still felt a long way off. But for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. I typed my reply. I told her I would like that very much, but that I wasn't ready to see Mom and Dad. I told her I was proud of her. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. For years, I believed family was an obligation, a debt you were born into and spent your life repaying. But I now knew the truth. Family, real family, had to be a relationship built on mutual respect. And the most important part of that equation was learning, finally, to respect yourself.